I am calling our meeting to order, and just a reminder that we're still meeting virtually and pursuant to the October 20th, 2021 City Council resolution. Comments for this meeting should have been submitted in writing to the email address with public comment in the subject line, and all comments needed to be received before 5 p.m. today. Comments submitted will be part of the public record. People can make verbal comments during the meeting and join the meeting on the Zoom link or by a telephone number. I will request public comment during item 1A. And if you are on the phone, you can either press *9 or raise your hand so that we know to turn you on and hear your public comment. You'll have 3 minutes to speak. Once your public comment is ended, your microphone will be muted again. And with that, let's kick off with a roll call.
Commissioner Dawson. Commissioner Guerra.
Present.
Commissioner Kim. Commissioner Olson.
Present.
Commissioner King.
Present.
Commissioner
Present.
Chairperson White.
Present.
Alternate Commission Member Smith.
Present.
Okay. Commissioner Kim is here. You say present?
Present.
Excellent. So thank you everybody for joining us tonight. And our first item on the agenda is public comment. Do we have any public comments this evening?
No comments from the public.
Excellent. Then we are on to item number 2, which is our homeless initiative presentation. Over to you, Raul.
Thank you. Sorry about that. Having a little bit of technical difficulties, but you should be seeing my screen now. Please, thank you. Great. Well, thank you very much. And good evening, Chairperson White and members of the Commission. This evening, we will be providing a brief overview of the various homeless initiatives in the city. And for the members of the public who may be watching this at home, my name is Raul Huerta, and I'm the housing manager for the Economic Development and Housing Department. My colleague, Mark Sawyer, homeless manager in the city's Community Outreach and Support Division, will be joining me this evening on the presentation. Specifically, we will be providing an overview of the city's past homeless initiatives, reviewing current activities that the city is undertaking, and discussing what we hope to accomplish in the near future. One of the first initiatives that was undertaken by the city, and more specifically by the former redevelopment agency of the city of West Sacramento, was in the mid-1990s. The former redevelopment agency partnered with United Christian Centers to acquire and rehabilitate an existing 11-unit residential property in the Broderick neighborhood into transitional housing. The redevelopment agency provided funds for both the acquisition of the site and the rehabilitation of the property. United Christian Centers has gone through some changes and now operates, at least in West Sacramento, as Shores of Hope, just as an FYI. But United Christian Centers also operated an emergency shelter for several years in the Broderick neighborhood, just around the corner from where the transitional housing program is located. However, the city didn't have any direct involvement in that emergency shelter. The shelter unfortunately closed a few years ago following a fire, and unfortunately, United Christian Centers was just never able to complete the repairs and reopen the site. However, Shores of Hope continues to operate the transitional housing project, and specifically they serve emancipated youth as their program. The next activity that we want to talk about is the creation of the Homeless Services Coordinator position. And for that, I'd like to ask Mark if he can provide an overview of that position, which ultimately now is called the Homeless Manager.
Sure. Thank you, Raul. The position, the Homeless Services Coordinator position, was formalized in around 2014. It was formed roughly around the same time that the Bridge to Housing program was taking form as well. I'll get into that more later on in the program. But the goal of the position was to have someone that was working for the city that was actively out in the field, working with people that were in encampment or that had quality of life issues that could be better addressed by a social worker. I don't know who came up with the idea, but at some point it was decided that individual should be based out of the police department, because I'm assuming up to that point, most of the homeless interactions had been spearheaded by the police department. And so the thought was that when police officers go out into encampments, they can bring a social worker with them that is well-versed at getting those individuals linked up with services. So that's what took place, started in 2014 by my predecessor, Ryan Collins. And it just allowed someone to be actively working in the community in conjunction with the police department, building rapport with the homeless individuals in West Sacramento, getting track of how many encampments there were, what services they need, what deficits they had to work on. And it ultimately was someone that was thought of as a linkage tool to, triage with people out in the field and then link them with the services that were provided by various systems of care in the county. Also, a few, months or about a year into it, there was thought that there should be a drop-in center, somewhere, a day and a time where individuals that were experiencing homelessness in the city of West Sacramento had somewhere that they could go. And so that was originally housed out of the police department. After only a few months, it became so popular that we moved it to the welfare office located at 500 Jefferson. And that was on Thursdays from 8 a.m. to 12 p.m. And that was just open office hours. Anyone that was experiencing an episode of homelessness or needed assistance with paying their rent or other various services, they could come in. And that combined with the encampment outreach, kind of the basis of that position.
Thank you, Mark. That's a great overview of the position, and certainly something that the city understood that was needed given the homeless situation that we had at the time, and that we continue to work to reduce. The next item that we wanted to talk about, and Mark briefly mentioned this, was the Bridge to Housing program, which is perhaps one of the biggest initiatives that the city undertook up to that point. And as Mark noted, the Bridge to Housing program was started in 2014, and it was a collaboration between the city of West Sacramento, Yolo County, and Yolo County Housing, in addition to other service providers and nonprofit entities. The Bridge to Housing program resulted from the need for the city to clear a very large homeless encampment along the North Levee area in the city. Ultimately, 65 individuals and 40 pets were relocated to the Old Town Inn, which was initially master leased by Yolo County Housing and ultimately purchased by the city. Yolo County Housing provided the day-to-day management of the Bridge to Housing program using a housing first model. And Yolo County provided intense case management services in coordination with other nonprofit and service providers. Our local police department staff and the service, the homeless services coordinator played a major role and took lead in the relocation of the participants into the Old Town Inn, and also coordinated services with Yolo County and Yolo County Housing for these individuals. The Bridge to Housing program operated for about 4 months and was by all measures a very successful program, and showed what a collaborative planning effort could achieve. And as Mark noted, he was involved in the Bridge to Housing program, not in his current capacity, but working for one of the service providers. And I'd like to ask Mark again to please give us his views about the program and the ultimate outcome of those individuals that were initially relocated to the Old Town Inn.
Sure. Thank you, Raul. I actually, when I first started working with the city and the police department, I actually didn't work for the city. I was contracted through Turning Point Community Programs, which is a local nonprofit that works largely with adults with severe mental illness. And the role that I was in was I was the mental health clinician that was stationed in the police department. And my first day back in October of 2014 was actually the final meeting until we went out the following day to do the Bridge to Housing program, to move everyone, the moving day. And so I was quickly, indoctrinated to what was going on. And I thought it was quite fascinating. And it was, we had a conference meeting with all different nonprofits and different agencies. And we all went over, what we were going to do that day, who was going to do what role. And it was, it's something that I had always been a proponent of, this housing first approach, where you take someone and you immediately provide them with respite housing to address their deficit. And I'd never seen it on that scale. And it was really something that I was proud to be a part of. And so, like Raul spoke to, the individuals were taken directly off the levee where there had been an active encampment for over 50 years. There had been some people that had lived there for over a decade. And that they were moved that day to the Old Town Inn. Their dogs were moved. Their clothes were taken to laundry service. The dogs were, serviced by veterinarians. It was just a huge thing, and it was, I learned quite a lot from it. And they moved there, and they were linked with case managers, and the goal was that within 90 days they were all going to be given a emergency Section 8 housing voucher. And that's quite a heavy lift to get 65 individuals Section 8 in 90 days. It took a little bit longer. I think, maybe Raul can correct me, but I think we ended up getting 120 days. But ultimately, about 70%, I think it ended up being 45, 50 people ended up getting Section 8 vouchers and found housing scattered amongst Yolo County. A large portion of them got housing here in West Sacramento. And many of the clients were clients that, as I transitioned into the homeless coordinator position a few years later, I would work with or see in the community. Many of them are still in the same apartments or housing options that they found then. And, I ultimately think it was a successful program. And it certainly was the starting point for kind of this, the city getting involved at a micro level with homeless services. I don't believe that there would be my current position. There certainly wouldn't be the emphasis on doing programs in motels and the housing first approach. I think all of that kind of was set by the success of Bridge to Housing. And we also learned from it too. And we learned, a little bit about, what a large undertaking it is. And I really think it's something that I have looked into as we are now currently doing Project Home Key and Project Room Key, which we will talk about later on.
Thank you again, Mark. Appreciate the additional information on that. Moving on, another initiative that the city undertook around 2012 was our Neighborhood Stabilization Program, or NSP. The city was awarded NSP Round 3 funding by HCD in 2012. And the program that we created, the main purpose was to combat the negative effects of vacant and abandoned homes in our neighborhoods. And what we set out to do was to rehabilitate these homes and make those available to low-income families. The city partnered with NeighborWorks Homeownership Center for an acquisition, rehab, and resale program. And we also partnered with Friends of the Mission for an acquisition, rehab, and rental program. And the rental program is what I'm focusing on for this particular program, because Friends of the Mission maintains those units as homeless units. The units are restricted to 30% to 50% of AMI households. And they work very closely with MARC and Yolo County for referrals. A total of 6 homes were acquired by Friends of the Mission, and they're scattered throughout the city. We have some in Southport and some in Brighton Broderick. So this is yet another activity that the city undertook as our efforts to try to deal with our homeless situation in the city. Another program that the city was involved for a couple of years was the Winter Warming Centers program. In 2018, the Mercy Coalition of West Sacramento approached both the city and Yolo County to collaborate on the Winter Warming Center program. Both the city and Yolo County provided $20,000 each to help fund the program during the 2018 and 2019 winter seasons. The Mercy Coalition arranged for 4 to 5 church locations for the nightly stays and picked up participants at set locations and transported them to the warming center location for that night. The Mercy Coalition also worked very closely with MARC to get referrals for that the Winter Warming Center. Once at the site, the Mercy Coalition provided beds, meals, and some basic supplies to all the participants. And the next morning, they were provided with breakfast and then transported to the pickup locations. The Winter Warming Centers program ran from December through March during that 2-year that it was operational. And a total of 114 unique individuals were served during those 2 winter seasons. And over 200 volunteers participated each year with an average of 2,200 service hours. So it, quite an undertaking as well, and something that was really needed. Unfortunately, we did not continue the Winter Warming Center, primarily because of Project Room Key and Home Key. We decided to focus our efforts on those larger activities, and we did not have a Winter Warming Center for this year. Speaking of Project Room Key, as you know, Yolo County is the lead agency implementing the countywide Project Room Key, which was a state initiative to respond to the COVID-19 pandemic. As part of Room Key, Yolo County master leased several motels throughout the county to provide emergency shelter to the homeless population. Project Room Key is intended to be a temporary emergency shelter option while also serving as a pathway to permanent housing. And the city of West Sac has been an active participant since implementation of the program in March of 2020. And as you might have guessed, our homeless manager, Mark, and the city's community outreach and support division have coordinated very closely with Yolo County for placements and to ensure that the participants have a safe place to isolate and receive needed services. Again, I'd like to turn it over to Mark and ask if he can provide some additional information about the services that are provided, since, again, he is very involved in Project Room Key and Home Key, which we will talk about in a few minutes.
Sure. Thank you, Raul. I think Raul, he definitely went over some of the main points and how it started. It was a response to the pandemic. It started in March of 2020. And this idea was that, individuals that were elderly or with chronic health conditions would not be candidates for conjugate settings or like shelter settings. And so the thought was that we would lease a motel rooms across different jurisdictions and house those individuals, which is what we did. The Yolo County Health and Human Services reached out to myself in West Sacramento and my counterpart in other cities, Davis and Woodland primarily, and asked them to, I don't want to say pick, but the client base that they had been working with, refer over clients that met the criteria, which at the time was 65 and older, and those with a list of about 7 or 8 chronic health that I don't really need to get into, but that was kind of the baseline. And that's how we started it. And as the pandemic got worse and worse, the criteria to get into Project Room Key got a little bit less strict, and it eventually opened up to anyone that was experiencing homelessness in a city. And so at its peak, in July of 2020, there were 120 individuals in West Sacramento scattered across 4 different motels. That has since been reduced down to about 40, although there is Project Home Key, which we will get into next, that also has 60. So we are actually in West Sacramento serving about 100 individuals. Originally, this happened so quickly that there wasn't much programming planned into what was going to happen. It was really just we are going to provide shelter for these individuals. We'll have some social workers that will check in, get food if needed, and things like that. As we got more, our bearings about us, we started developing some things. And me and the team, which is largely staffed by YCCA, Yolo County Children's Alliance, we started coming up with other things that we could work on. We started working with Yolo County Health and Human Services, started getting these individuals documents, social security cards, driver's license. Other thing we started working on with the thought that while they were housed in a set location, we can start doing some work to see if we could perhaps get permanent housing. Thought it was a great opportunity to get a population that was largely elusive by nature and hard to reach. We had them in one location and we could start doing some work. And that continues to this day. Someone comes into Project Room Key, starts working with the staff and myself, and we immediately start working on their deficit and with the thought of getting them the documents that they need and income if they need it to get permanent housing. We have gotten over 30, now maybe 40, over 40 individuals, Section 8. And we have to date housed over 98 individuals that started in Project Room. So it's been greatly successful. And that is the main thing that we are working on now. We are meeting the individual's initial needs when they come in and then start working on permanent housing. The great thing about Project Room Key that I like is that there is not a timetable attached to it, at least currently. There is individuals that have been there for over a year. Because each case can be complex, it's good to not have a time limit because some of these cases require a lot of work and a lot of time. And I think that has allowed us to get some cases that, originally would be somewhat unhousable, enough time to work with them and get the support that they need to eventually become someone that is a candidate for permanent housing.
Thank you, Mark. And
Thank you,
I do want to point to the picture. You'll note that that's Governor Newsom. Just a quick note on that. When Governor Newsom announced Project Broomkey, he made the announcement at one of our motel sites, which we actually ended up purchasing for our HomeKey program, which is the next program that we're going to talk about. And again, so the HomeKey program is in essence a continuation of Project Broomkey with the goal of creating permanent and medium-term housing for homeless individuals. This is also a state-level program that supports the acquisition and occupancy of hotels and motels and other properties to house people that are experiencing homelessness throughout the state during the COVID-19 pandemic. The city applied for HomeKey funds to acquire 4 motels, believe it or not, along West Capitol Avenue. And while the city was awarded funds for all 4 acquisitions, unfortunately, only the acquisition of the Roadway Inn materialized. As we noted earlier, the Roadway Inn was already being used as a Project HomeKey site, so it made a lot of sense to pursue that acquisition. And it also made the transition of those clients and the services a lot easier than if we would have acquired a motel that was not already part of Project Broomkey. The acquisition of the motel was made possible not only with the state HomeKey funds, but also with a Yolo County subaward, CDBG and CDBG COVID funds, and local Measure E funds. So it was a significant investment by the city using some of our very valued funding that we have available for these types of activities. Additionally, the state also provided an 18-month operational subsidy for the HomeKey program, which is the money that we are using to pay for those case management services, the meal distributions, property management, security, all of the operations of the program, at least for the next 18 months. The 40-unit motel is currently serving 61 individuals, although that number changes quite rapidly because of placements that they're able to make. And they are receiving, again, on-site case management, meal distribution, and some laundry services. Mark and the Community Outreach and Support Division oversee the day-to-day operations of the HomeKey program, which, as you can imagine, is an enormous undertaking. So again, I'd like to ask Mark to elaborate on, the day-to-day operations and the services that those clients are receiving and the success that they've had in placing a lot of those individuals into permanent housing.
Sure. Thank you, Raul. There will be some overlap. Obviously, I kind of explained to some degree Project Broomkey. Project HomeKey is not ran necessarily much different than Project Broomkey. In fact, as Raul alluded to, Project HomeKey at the Roadway Inn was a Project Broomkey site until December 8th, 2020, when we purchased it and it went through. So not a lot changed, kind of the name. But I will go over some of the, the daily operations that take place. There is a staff of 4 case managers. One is dedicated to the Project Broomkey sites, which are housed out of the Economy Inn and the Crest. And then the other 3, and myself included, are case managing the individuals at the Roadway, the 40 units there. There are 40 units with approximately 60 to 65 individuals in them. It fluctuates, as Raul alluded to. There are a few double rooms there. I often, will add as many people as we can, try to get as many people the services. Each case manager has a caseload of 10 to 15 households. And the main goal, I have this approach where I have directed the staff, the first 60 days that somebody is in the program, we're not heavily working with them or forcing them to do many things. Many of these individuals have been living outside for many years. There's quite a shock to come in and have to start abiding by a lot of rules and structure. And so we kind of work with individuals during that period. They certainly feel the support. We bring food to their door when needed. We'll help them with, clothing closets and other, common homeless services. At some point, we start gearing up into looking at long-term solutions. Obviously, his goal is not going to be to live in a transitional housing program forever. And so we start working on, does this person have income? Do you have the documents needed to procure an apartment? Things like that. And the staff start working on that. So on a day-to-day basis, we're giving out ID vouchers. We're contacting Social Security to order people's Social Security cards. We're applying for apartments. We're applying to the Housing Authority for Section 8. Just a lot of stuff that is geared at where the person will go to after they leave Project Home. Many of the individuals, as we alluded to earlier, are 65 and older. I think out of the 60 people that are currently living at the roadway in Project Home Key, approximately 25 to 30 are 65 and older. So there are many things that come along with that. We have CommuniCare, street medicine doctors that come once a week and work with everyone. There are many IHSS workers and home skilled nurses that come. There are a lot of various services. Every case is different and they're very nuanced, and a lot of different cases need different things. But we work with everyone. There are clients there as young as 18, and there's a client there that's 86. So we kind of see everything, all different various things that come up, and we just work on stabilizing them and then looking towards permanent housing.
Thank you, Mark.
No problem.
So Downtown Streets team, now in its fourth year of operation, this is perhaps one of our most visible homeless initiatives in the city. If you're driving along West Capitol Avenue on any given day, you're likely to see DST members in their bright yellow shirts collecting garbage and debris. One of the main goals of the DST program is to restore the dignity among their program participants and prepare them for future employment and permanent housing. So they also receive housing navigation services and some case management support. And they do this while at the same time providing a very valuable service of collecting garbage and debris, including sharps, along some targeted areas of the city. DST also works very closely and coordinates with Mark and the Community Outreach and Support Division and Parks and Recreation staff to identify other areas that may need service, not just cleaning up, but also graffiti removal and other more involved cleanups in certain parts of the city. During the first 3 years of the program, an average of 37 unique individuals have been served every year by DST. 27 DST members have found gainful employment, and that's employment that had lasted for at least 90 days. Over 380,000 gallons of debris has been collected, and over 2,800 sharps have been collected from the streets as well. The DST program is fully funded by the city's Measure E funds, and we anticipate that this project will continue to be funded in the future. And again, because it's one of the most highly visible programs, I would also say that it's one of our most popular programs in the city. We're often getting comments from the public about the DST members out in the street, and especially on social media, you can see that the members of the public love to see them out there and really appreciate the fact that, at least in their view, we're not providing handouts. They're actually helping beautify the community and getting something in return as well. So it's certainly one of our most popular programs and one that is very supportive. Our council supports and our community. Our next current initiative is our permanent supportive housing project. Again, another very visible project that has been in the works for over 4 years. The project is located along West Capitol Avenue. It'll provide 85 units of supportive housing for our homeless residents. All placements into this PSH project are by referral only, primarily by our homeless manager, Mark, Yolo County Health and Human Services Agency, and Yolo County Housing. The main building fronting West Capitol Avenue, which is what we have on the photo, received its temporary certificate of occupancy last month, and the first group of residents started to move in a couple of weeks ago. The remaining two buildings should receive their certificate of occupancy by the end of the year, and additional move-ins will follow shortly after that. The city provided significant investment for this project, but again, it also represents one of the most important homeless initiatives that the city has undertaken to date, obviously in cooperation with Mercy Housing. And again, Mark is very involved in the project with Mercy Housing and the service providers. He has done an extraordinary job in providing referrals and making sure that people were ready to move in as soon as the project received its first certificate of occupancy. So again, I'd like to ask Mark to share some of the work that he has done and the coordination that he's done with Mercy Housing and the other service providers.
Sure, thank you, Raul. As Raul spoke to, this project has been many years in the making. A little bit about me: before I worked here in West Sacramento for the city, I actually worked for Turning Point in Sacramento at permanent supportive housing sites. So I was familiar at the approach, Mercy Housing in general, and also the Housing First approach, taking people from chronic homelessness and moving them into these low to no barrier housing units. And so it was something that I was well versed in and thought would be a good idea for the city. And so I was, quite thrilled when this project started moving forward. I actually, many years ago now, took the council and the city manager at the time to a project in Sacramento that was an old motel on Stockton Boulevard that Mercy Housing had turned into a PSH. And that was I thought maybe something that would be comparable in the West Sac since we had so many motels. Eventually, the project turned into a new build on a city-owned lot, and the rest is history. As the project kind of got impacted to some degree, from my standpoint, by the pandemic, like all things. Originally, I had planned to start pulling the referrals for individuals from my client base that was coming to my walk-in appointment. When those got canceled, I kind of pivoted to start beginning to ponder pulling my referrals from people that were in Project Room Key and ultimately Project Home. And so that is what we did. The city had 44, and Raul, correct me on the numbers if you know them better than me. I'm estimating, but we had 44 referrals out of the 85 units. And I would say that all of them came from people that were in Project Room Key, Home Key, or were familiar with coming to the roadway and to the sites receiving drop-in services. We also referred another 10 that went into the other 41 units that were serviced by mental health providers, but that were in Project Room Key and Home Key. And how that took place is that we would take a client that was in Project Room Key, Home Key, and say that we think this person is document ready. They have all the paperwork that they need, and they can be sent over to Mercy Housing to be considered for this. And we would do that. And so we would take someone, come off the street, get in Project Home Key, Room Key, and we would immediately start working on getting them the documents, getting everything they needed, and we would submit it to sometimes the housing authority and also Mercy Housing and get them approved for apartments. The move-ins have already begun. I think 38 of the 50 that are going to be moving in have already moved in and live at the site. So we are proud of that. It was a collaboration with many agencies: Yolo County Health and Human Services, Yolo County Housing and Mercy Housing, Yolo County Children's Alliance, Telecare. All these agencies worked together to get individuals that were originally homeless in West Sacramento housed in Project Room and Home Key, and ultimately in permanent housing. So it's something that, I know the city is very proud of. I am certainly very proud of it as well. And, I think that it worked out very well.
Indeed. Thank you, Mark, again for all that additional information. Again, it's been quite an endeavor. It's one of our main projects and something that we are very proud of. And we have certainly done everything that we can to make sure that as many of our West Sacramento homeless residents are able to get into the project itself. Moving on, these are some additional initiatives that especially Mark and the Community Outreach and Support Division work on a daily basis. We went through some of the major projects, but they have a lot more on their plates, and these are some of the other activities that Mark and his team work on. So again, it always surprises me how much they have on their plate and how much they can do with the limited staff that they have available to them. So I every time I get an opportunity, I have to commend Mark and his team because they do a great job. So I would like to ask Mark again to just briefly go over these additional activities that they work on. Again, nothing too involved, but at least a short overview of each one.
Sure. Thanks, Raul. I'll try to keep it brief. The first one is just the individuals that make up the division. It's my supervisor, Taylor Nelson, myself, and then there is an individual, Charles Doss, who coordinates various community events. That would be like National Night Out, boxing camp, toy drive, things like that. There is an assistant who helps every one of us. We are hiring a homeless assistant that will be working under me. Hopefully that will be done in the next couple months. And there are 2 mental health clinicians that they're more reactionary in nature, whereas they have radios and they respond to active calls, police calls that require mental health expertise, 5150s and things like that. Like Raul also spoke to, and that is there on the slide, this division works, actively every day in a collaboration with the Yolo County Children's Alliance, Yolo County Health and Human Services, the HPAC, which I am a board member of, Communicare, Mercy Coalition, Mercy Housing, St. Vincent de Paul's, Shores of Hope, all the real, homeless providers that are in Yolo County and specifically West Sacramento. We work with on a daily basis, all of us working with the same client base. There's a lot of overlap, things like that. One of the programs that I'm particularly proud of that we've had for some times long before the pandemic is this emergency respite motel voucher program. Project Room Key and Home Key certainly were not the first time that myself and the division have used the motels in this city to our advantage. I have been working with the motel owners, operators since I came here. The emergency, since we don't have a homeless shelter per se in West Sacramento, at least until now, I often would use the motels for respite housing for individuals that would show up that were very acute and needed to be off the street and maybe for whatever reason couldn't get to 4th and Hope, the homeless shelter that is in Woodland, or were not appropriate for shelter setting. So I still continue that, not to the degree that I used to, because, we obviously own a motel now. And so a lot of those people are in that program. But still, if someone shows up, if I get a call from the police department or for a various agency within the city, it's late and they say, hey, there's this person, they need to be, they're on the street, they need help immediately. We do have the ability to put people up for, a finite amount of time in a motel. so we can, wrap services around them and get them whatever service they need. It's something that I'm proud of. It works, and it certainly, can help people that are in the most dire of circumstances in the city. We also have this direct referral process for rapid rehousing. It is rental assistance for West Sac residents. What it typically covers is new move-ins. Now, because we are so busy, we often don't have the ability to find individuals housing. Oftentimes if an individual can find housing on their own accord, they come to us with the paperwork, and we can pay first month's rent and usually a security deposit. That often is, a deal breaker for people that are on fixed incomes. If you're on Social Security and you only get $1,000 a month, you often can't come up with $2,000 to $3,000 that it needs to get an apartment. And so this is a program that provides that. We help dozens of individuals with this service every month. Between myself, the Yolo County Children's Alliance, Doors of Hope, we all work together on this. We also provide eviction prevention when needed. Admittedly, we did that more before the pandemic. There's been statewide preventative measures in place that have kind of superseded ours. But we do also help with eviction prevention. If somebody gets behind on rent for whatever reason, we'll assist with that. Also, something I wanted to touch on briefly that I think is very important and a great asset to the city is the implementation of public stuff. I think it's called West Sac Connect. Maybe you can correct me, Raul, if you know, but it's an application where individuals in the city can report various complaints. And one of the things that people can report is homeless encampments. So we, every day we come into work and we'll have a few public stops where community members have alerted us to homeless encampments. That has helped us twofold, right? I mean, on one hand, citizens are reporting homeless encampments that may be problematic to them or impacting their quality of life. And then also it alerts us and gets us out to encampments that maybe we were not aware of. And I can get out there and provide services. So I like that, it assists both on both sides of the spectrum, people that are alarmed by homeless encampments, but then it also allows me to get out and provide services to encampments. The last thing I want to speak on is this HMIS data entry. HMIS stands for Homeless Management Information Services. It is a computer software that tracks homeless data. It is very much used by many agencies in Yolo County, and because the city of West Sacramento has opted into using it, it is one of the reasons we have been so successful in referring our clients to various services, whether it be permanent supportive housing units, Section 8, different things like that. When those opportunities come about, the Yolo County Health and Human Services will often use the data that's in HMIS. And so because we have been so diligent in working in that and putting all of our programs in HMIS, I believe it is one of the reasons why we have been so successful in linking our clients with services.
Indeed. Thank you, Mark. Again, it's just amazing, all of the work that Mark and his team do. I can only imagine everything that they have to do. In terms of future initiatives and trying to look into the future, the city will obviously continue to actively look for homeless housing opportunities. Whether it's additional affordable housing projects or potential motel acquisitions to provide low income or no barrier entry. Currently in the pipeline, we are working with Jamboree Housing on the development of the 60-unit West Gateway Place Phase 2 affordable housing project, which I believe we have presented to you in the past. This development will contain 6 family PSH units. And Jamboree is in the final stages of assembling the financing for the project, and we are very hopeful that the project will be able to get off the ground in 2022. And again, we will continue to have an active homeless team. Mark and the community outreach team to identify those hard to reach homeless individuals and try to provide the services that they need. As Mark noted previously, it's a lot easier to do it when we have them in one location, whether it's Project Roomkey or Project Punky. They're able to really assess their needs and provide the services. It's a lot more difficult when they're out in the out on the streets to get them the services that they need. But certainly that's something that Mark and his team will continue to be active on and try to reach to all of these individuals. And also anticipate continuing our DST program and looking at ways to expand these types of programs that offer an opportunity to these homeless individuals to start returning to self-sufficiency. So that concludes our presentation. I think I need a drink of water now. We've been talking for a while, but as I was putting the presentation together along with Mark, it was just amazing how much the city has done over the years. We tend to forget that we have been very active, and especially since the creation of the homeless manager position, I think we have really stepped up and tried to look at ways to provide services to these individuals. So I thank you for your time, and both Mark and I are available for any questions.
Thank you, Raul and Mark. Any questions from the commissioners?
I do have a couple questions. This is Sunny Thornton. Mark, I want to congratulate you and Raul on all the amazing stuff that you guys have been doing. This was a really informative presentation, and I love the idea of the DST team. I actually didn't know about it. I don't know how I didn't know about it, but I think this is amazing, and I think it's a great idea to expand on that. I think it could be very useful. I did have a question on Project Homekey. You guys had, and correct me if I'm wrong, Raul, I may have misunderstood, but did you guys say that you had received or were awarded funds for 4 motels, but only one ended up being purchased?
That is correct. We originally submitted 4 applications for the Homekey program for 4 acquisitions. And the state gave us reservations, which is basically an award of funds for those 4 motel acquisitions. Unfortunately, as we were going through our due diligence and working with the motel owners, we were ultimately not able to come to a reasonable agreement with 3 of them, and we were only able to move forward with the roadway in.
Okay. Were those other funds forfeited then?
Yeah, I mean, in essence, because we were not able to move forward with the other 3, those funds went back to the state, and the state reallocated those funds to other projects.
Okay, thank you so much.
So this is Commissioner Guerra. I have a quick question. Actually, just a comment to echo, Commissioner Thornton's remarks. Everything you just walked us through is remarkable. So congratulations on what you're doing, and encourage you to keep going forward. It definitely shows. A question, with the Mercy Housing and the Homekey program, do you feel like you have enough units to meet the demand? Because obviously everybody that you'd like to get in there, some of them don't want to participate, right? But from the ones that want to participate, do you feel like you have enough units to meet the demand? Or if we had more units, we would have more people that would want to participate?
I'll let Mark provide a better answer, but what I do want to say is that I think there's always going to be demand, unfortunately, for these types of permanent supportive housing units. I don't think that the Mercy Housing Project fulfills all of that need that there is in the city. and that's unfortunately the reality of homelessness. But I'll let Mark elaborate on that and give his thoughts.
Yeah, I mean, I think I would probably just piggyback on what Raul said. While I do think that it is quite remarkable the number of units that we have between Project Room Key, Home Key, the Motel Voucher Program, and now PSH for a city of our size, of course, there is always going to be demand. We're going to do a pit count, which is a point-in-time homeless count, which we haven't done since 2019 because of the pandemic. That is basically one night at the end of January where we get out and we go and do a point-in-time count of the number of people that are outside in encampments in the city. I think at that point, I will be able to better answer, how many people are still out there and how many existing units do we need. The problem is that, homelessness is like a fluid thing. And so I may house 5 people and then 5 other people in West Sac become homeless. And so it's hard to say. But yes, ultimately having more units, certainly more permanent supportive housing, low to no barrier units where, the property managers will work with people with maybe low credit or past evictions or other things that present themselves for barriers for the homeless population. Those are always going to be assets and will always help us as we're working towards lowering homelessness.
I have a question as well. This is Commissioner Olson. Again, thank you for the presentation and all the work the city has been doing, and the two of you. Do you have an estimate on the pit count that is coming up in January? I know there's, I think, around 85 in 2019. Do you think that's grown or gotten less?
I'll let Mark respond to that one. Mark, if you don't mind.
Sure. I mean, I think that it probably is less. I estimate it somewhere between 40 to 60. What counts on the pit count is a little different than maybe just what you can see with the eyes. So in order to meet the criteria for the pit count, you have to have been outside in the elements the previous night. And so in West Sacramento, oftentimes, with so many motels, people that are, in a room for a night, they may be homeless by the time we talk to them for the pit count because they got a room for one night, but they wouldn't count for the course of the pit count. Also, people that are sleeping on a friend's couch or other various things, they also aren't counted. And so the number is a little, deceptive, as numbers can often be. But I do think that it's down since 2019. But not as much as I would like it, because we have housed so many people in Room Key and Home Key. You almost think that if you punch the numbers, if we have 100 people housed and our pit count was 87, we shouldn't have any homeless people. It should be at functional 0, but that is not the case. And so, but I do think that it is probably down, and that is in a region in which homelessness is up 50 to 60% in the Sacramento metropolitan area. So I think even if we were staying the same, holding the line at 87, it would be a victory because it has gone up in every other jurisdiction around us. And so, but no, I do think that it's a little bit.
Mark, it's Chris, and just as a follow up to what Dan asked, do you see any impact from the safe ground in Sacramento with folks being able to stay in Sacramento, or is there less movement back and forth across the river? And some of those safe ground camps are going to get broken up because of the Caltrans work on 50. Do you think that's going to impact us? I know I'm asking you to look at a crystal ball and make a guess.
Yeah, I think it will impact us to some degree. I will say that I have been quite surprised since working in West Sac. Oftentimes, the homeless individuals in West Sac are from Sacramento, and there is not as much people coming over from Sacramento as you would think. If the homeless district Loaves and Fishes is not far from West Sacramento, but we don't get a lot of carryover. Another thing that I have done, since the beginning, and the team has, is, you have to have Yolo County Medi-Cal in order to get services. in this city. And so if individuals come over from Sacramento and we don't know them and I'm not familiar with them and we run their Medi-Cal and they have Sacramento Medi-Cal, they will be, given some resources in Sacramento. It takes 45 to 60 days to change your Medi-Cal. And so someone that's coming over here to get services will not wait around 60 days. And so even if big camp, Chris, are broken up and some people come over here, there won't necessarily be services readily available for them. And if they're not familiar and from West Sac, they most likely won't stay here because they won't feel comfortable sleeping here in encampments because they're not from.
Thank you.
Hey, Mark, this is Commissioner Singh. You answered part of my question about the Medi-Cal for the qualification. Is there any other criteria we use to selection process? For example, there's a 50 units available and we have a 60 people. How you sort between them, which 50 of the 60 you want to get the unit or the services besides the medical card we have?
Commissioner Singh, are you speaking to the permanent supportive housing units or
Correct,
or just...
correct for the housing unit?
Sure. So that was it's a pretty complicated process. It was a little nuanced. There had to be qualifications for both Mercy Housing and usually for also the Yolo County Housing Authority, which does the Section 8 program. And so one of the biggest requirements would be just individuals that had put in the footwork to get the documents that are needed to get a Section 8 voucher or apply for an apartment. So, for example, Mr. Singh, if I had a client and they were in Project Room Key or Home Key for 8 months and they'd never worked with us to get any of their documents, while that wouldn't necessarily get them kicked out of Project Room Key, it may take them out of consideration for a permanent supportive housing unit because they wouldn't be able to get a Section 8 voucher and become eligible for that. So for most of the people that got chosen for 1801 West Cap, it was largely based on who was doing the footwork, who was going out there and getting the documents needed, who was following up with their case managers, who actually expressed a desire to even live in that setting. And there are some people that are not interested in doing that. They're interested in the motel program and getting some light services, but we're not interested in doing other things. So most of the people that were referred were the individuals that put in the footwork. And obviously there was an emphasis on elderly and more acute, and we would work, a little more in depth with people like that maybe didn't have the ability to go to DMV, go to Social Security, get the documents they needed. But, at the end of the day, the number one factor that resulted in someone getting to the Mercy Project was them putting in the footwork and expressing a desire to live.
Thanks. But the requirements are a standard by state or the county, because the requirement in Yolo County is different than Sacramento, or they pretty much the same? So
what can you be a little more specific? I mean, what requirements? You mean to live at the apartment?
No. To move from the temporary housing to permanent housing, you said certain qualification or documentation they have to present.
Yeah, you in order to get a Section 8 voucher from the Yolo County Housing Authority, you would need a valid California ID or driver's license, Social Security card, and a birth certificate. And if you have any income, proof of your income. Those are the documents that you would need in order to submit an application to get Section 8. And, I would say almost 100% of participants in Room Key or Home Key did not have all those documents when they come in. And so getting those documents is a main factor in whether or not you can pursue permanent supportive housing. And so that's what I was speaking to when I said the documentation.
No, that's fine. What I was asking is that documentation requirement is same for Yolo County homeless people and Sacramento fulfill the requirement for permanent housing, or there's a state requirement, then a county requirement, and the city requirement. I'm just trying to figure out, is that a standard between the different agencies or the counties or the state, or everybody makes their own?
I think there is somewhat of a standard, but yeah, there is some autonomy amongst different, jurisdictions.
Okay.
If I may add, Commissioner Singh, it also depends on the funding sources that are being used for the specific projects. Every funding source has different requirements. Unfortunately, they're not all the same. For example, for that Mercy PSH project, a large part of their funding comes from No Place Like Home funding, which has very specific requirements as to qualifications. So they have to go through the county continuum of care, and they have to be in that HMIS system that Mark was talking about. Funding that the project received from Yolo County Housing, the vouchers, they have another set of requirements. So it really depends primarily on the funding sources that are being used for the projects, what those requirements are going to be. So they could be very different depending on, even on projects in West Sacramento, they could be very different or slightly different.
Thank you.
Hello, all. This is Commissioner Kim. Just want to start off by echoing all of my colleagues and congratulating you for a wonderful job done. I, coming as a real estate development side, really believe this makes so much sense. Instead of building new construction for homeless shelters and or affordable housing, to retrofit already existing facilities, much more economically viable. With that being said, a quick question to either Raul or Mark. So for many of these respite centers, that are grant funded, that retrofitted these motels, if that funding runs out, then are there thoughts of potentially transforming those respite homeless shelters into more permanent affordable housing? And then so that's kind of like question one. And then question two is for Raul mentioned that there are other motels that you have currently identified for future site selection. Like, how many motels are there? And then what kind of is your criteria to determine it to decide if it's going to be, a homeless shelter versus an affordable housing project that could be retrofitted into?
I can try to answer the questions, but I may need some help from Mark. But so in terms of what motels we are looking at, certainly location is one criteria. It makes a lot more sense for us to try to acquire a motel or motels that are in close proximity to our existing home key program at the Roadway Inn. But the main criteria is going to be the willingness of the motel owner to negotiate a reasonable sale. And that was one of the main reasons why the sale or the acquisition of the other three motels that we had applied for ultimately fell through, is because they're not necessarily the most reasonable sellers, especially when there's no reason for them to sell. So those are probably the two main criteria when we're trying to identify potential acquisitions. One of the positives is that Mark has built a very good relationship with a lot of these motel owners, and that relationship goes a long way. So we will always be in communication with Mark when looking at potential site acquisitions, and he played a major role in negotiating the actual acquisition of that Roadway Inn, because again, he has those relationships with most of these motel owners. The second question, or the first question was, I'm sorry.
It was if funding runs out for the homeless shelters for these motels to run programming, is there thoughts of transforming it to other types of affordable housing?
So the commitment that we have Every jurisdiction that received home key funds has different requirements to the state. The commitment that we have with the state of California is to operate the home key site for a minimum of 5 years. As I noted in the presentation, we received an operational subsidy from the home key program for an 18-month period. But yet we have to operate it for at least another 5 years, or at least another, 3 years. So one of the tasks that I have and our group has is to identify other funding sources to continue the operations of the home key program. We have applied for ESG emergency solution grant funding, and have been awarded additional operational funding for case management. So that takes care of some of that need. But ultimately, we are going to have to look at other funding sources to make sure that we have the operation money for the remainder of that 5-year term.
Well, along those lines, and I realize I just talked to you all about how I was on a commission meeting that went till my part was past 10 o'clock at night, and I don't want to keep us here that long. But to that point, one of the things that you may have not been around long enough to know, probably only JP and I know, that the Margaret McDowell Manor that's over by Rayleigh's used to be a motel. That was the first motel that the city helped convert into something that was not motel. And a key part of that was also getting it rezoned to not be a motel and instead be residential. And with the amount of money that is coming from both the state and the utilities and the federal government for multifamily housing, it might be worth taking a look at rezoning the roadway from motel, hotel, or temporary housing to something that's more like dormitory housing, because it would make you eligible for some funding that would help reduce the operating costs. Energy bills, water bills, things like that.
Sure. Yeah, no, thank you for that. We will certainly consider that. But yeah, that's something that we're, learning is the operations are a lot more than what we originally anticipated. Because, we're not just talking about case management and meal distribution. We're also talking about property management. We're also talking about security. We're also talking about utilities. We're talking about, door lock mechanisms breaking down and having to replace them, things of that nature. So, we have a motel that may or may not have been designed to be at full occupancy 100% of the time, which it is now. And certainly, and Mark can probably tell you a lot more stories than I can. We're seeing some of those deficiencies because, again, the structure was not necessarily meant to again house 100% of the time and have 100% occupancy. And then not only that, again, we have now case managers on site. So we have office space. They're using computers. They're using copiers. So the use has changed dramatically, and that has also affected the operation.
For sure. And they're also just really old buildings. As a person who owned one of those really old buildings for a long time, I can tell you they are not meant to be around this long. And, to your point about the price, again, as a person who's been trying to buy one of those motels for almost 20 years now, many of those property owners think that their property is worth a whole lot of money.
Correct.
So unless there are any other comments, we will let Mark and Raul go have dinner, and we can move on to our other 2 agenda items.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Our second agenda item, our third agenda item ought to be pretty quick. Consideration of our September 22nd minutes. They are attached to the meeting agenda. Any comments or corrections to the minutes? And if not, can I have a motion to accept the minutes, please?
Motion to accept the minutes.
I second that motion to accept the minutes.
Hey, that is a motion by Commissioner Kim, a second by Commissioner Thornton. And Madam Clerk, will you please read the roll call?
Yes. Commissioner Guerra,
Yes.
Commissioner Kim,
Yes.
Commissioner Olson,
I was not there, so do I abstain? I don't know if I can confirm the minutes.
thank you. Commissioner Singh.
I wasn't present
Oh,
either, so
sorry about that. Commissioner Thornton,
Yes.
Chairperson White,
Yes.
and alternate commission member Thomas.
Yes.
Thank you.
All right, and we are moving on to our last agenda item, which is about the Community Development Block Grant. You all may remember that that was on our first meeting, and I told you it would not be the last time you hear about the CDBG. So over to you, Isaiah.
Thank you. Good evening, Chairperson White and members of the Commission. My name is Isaiah Alford, and I'm the Community Investment Specialist in the Economic Development and Housing Department. Today, I'll be presenting information regarding the substantial amendment to the 2021 Annual Action Plan. After my presentation, staff respectfully request that the Commission vote to recommend that the City Council approve Amendment Number 1 to the CDBG 2021 Annual Action Plan. As the Commission may recall, the City of West Sacramento became an entitlement jurisdiction to receive funding from the U.S. Department of Housing, Urban Development in 2016. According to HUD regulations, the city must develop a 5-year consolidated plan examining the needs of low-income persons and neighborhoods and setting goals for the use of CDBG funding. Each year, the city must develop an annual action plan which consists of activities and actions to address the priority needs and specific goals identified within the consolidated plan. The 2021 Annual Action Plan budgeted $434,217 for the Washington Neighborhood Improvement Project, which fulfilled Consolidated Plan Goal Number 3, which was to construct infrastructure improvements in low-income neighborhoods. All CDBG funded activities must comply with National Environmental Policy Act, known as NEPA. NEPA requires federal agencies to evaluate the environmental effect of their proposed actions prior to making decisions. The NEPA review for the Washington project was originally anticipated to be completed in November 2021, but due to prolonged cultural resource consultation, the NEPA review is not expected to be completed until early 2022. CDBG funds allocated to the project cannot be spent until the NEPA process is completed. HUD requires entitlement jurisdictions to spend funds within a timely manner or that jeopardize the city receiving funds for the year-to-year basis. And we usually have a timeliness expenditure test on May 1st of every year. So with that being said, there's a higher probability that the city will not meet its timeliness expenditure test based on the current project. So staff is recommending that the funds be reclassified to the North Riverwalk Trail Improvement Project. The North Riverwalk Trail Improvement Project was one of the top priorities during the development of the Washington Realized Sustainable Community Strategy Plan, and the project addresses concerns of the residents of Washington neighborhood. CDBG funded the design of the project in program year 2016. During this time, right-of-way and permitting activities have taken place. The anticipated timeline to begin construction is in February 2022. And this would incur expenses that would immediately allow the city to meet its timeliness expenditure test in 2022. The funds would be primarily used for materials and construction. And in addition, an initial NEPA was completed in 2017 when the design work for the North Riverwalk Trail was funded, and an updated NEPA was completed, or will be completed by the end of the year. This project meets the consolidated goal number 3 as well, because it will benefit the low-income residents of Census Tract 101.01. And according to the city's citizen participation plan, reclassifying funds require the city to substantially amend the 2021 Annual Action Plan. It's also important to note that a 30-day public comment period was initiated on October 15th, 2021 through November 16th, 2021. And as of today, staff has not received any public comment. So in conclusion, staff is recommending that the commission vote recommend that the City Council approves substantial amendment number 1 to the CDBG 2020 Annual Action Plan. I know Raul just gave a great presentation, but Raul and I are available for questions.
Questions from the commissioners? And Isaiah, I'm just going to summarize everything you told us, which was awesome, in 2 sentences. It is shifting the funding from one project to another in the same neighborhood. And it's something that was already in the plan. And this really has to do with the timeliness and being ready to construct the project to meet the funding, the parameters of using the funds.
Correct.
So this is not something like new, like, hey, let's go out and do this instead. It was already in the plan.
Correct.
So questions from the commissioners? Dan?
Yes, I have a question. So these funds are being diverted because the environmental plan was not able to be executed in time, right?
Right.
And so because there's a May 1st deadline for when the money needs to be spent, or at least needs to appear to be being spent due to that audit, if the money's supposed to start in February on this project, is there a chance this project gets delayed? And our meeting in March or April is to discuss where to quickly put the money.
No, this money should be spent due to the materials that's going to be spent, that's used for this project. Please, Raul, please interject if I'm not answering this correctly, but the materials and construction will cover a majority of the expenditures.
And that shouldn't be delayed. That should happen by February.
Correct.
Okay.
Yeah, if I could just elaborate on what Isaiah just mentioned, that's correct, Commissioner Olson. So the North Riverwalk Trail project is expected to break ground in February. The CDBG funds that are being reallocated will be used for the purchase of materials and equipment. So those expenses will take place first. And all of the funds will be expended by the purchase of those materials. So in conversations with our capital projects and transportation team who oversee, both the E&F Street project and the North Riverwalk Trail project, those funds will be expended, by March with the purchase of those materials. They are already in the process of soliciting and procuring the equipment and materials that will be used for the North Riverwalk extension. So by the time that we get formal approval by the commission and the council, and they're ready to break ground, these funds should be spent almost immediately. Now, can I tell you with 100% certainty that will happen? Unfortunately, I can't. But again, based on the conversations that we've had with our capital projects and transportation team, they have, assured us that should happen in a very timely fashion.
Okay. Is there a backup project in case there's a delay?
Not at the present time. And the reason that we don't have a backup project, and again, one of the reasons why we selected this North Riverwalk Trail project is because this North Riverwalk Trail project is ready to go, right? They're expected to break ground in February. The NEPA has basically been completed. What is being completed is the right-of-way acquisition, and that also is expected to be completed by the end of January at the latest. If we were to look at any other activity, we would basically have to start from scratch. We would have to begin the NEPA process from scratch. And, NEPA process alone takes at least 45 days, usually longer than that. So we would really, it would be very difficult to meet that expenditure deadline if we looked at any other activity. So we had to look at an activity that we had previously funded that was contemplated in our original 5-year consolidated plan, and that had already had NEPA, more than one, multiple NEPAs because of different funding sources. And this project seemed, met all of those requirements. So this is our best alternative to make sure that those funds are spent.
Thank you.
I have a question. So we have a material and equipment to be spent by May for $432,000. Where the funding going to come for the labor to install the project?
The North River Walk Trail project is being funded by other city capital improvement funds. CDBG will only pay for most of those equipment and material purchases. The total cost of the equipment and materials is about $800,000. So it's only going to cover a portion of those costs. This is a project that is in the capital improvement plan for the city and has been allocated funds from other city sources. So CDBG is not the funding source that's going to be used for the actual construction work.
So we have a funding in place to execute the project.
That is correct. That is correct. Yes.
Yeah. So other question I have, in the one of the last meeting, we also allocated some funds for the E&F
correct. The E&F
improvement or something.
Mm-hmm. Correct.
So this funding, the CDBG funding comes from Department of Housing and Urban Development. By the title of it, seems like it's for housing and maybe for other development, urban development. Do you remember, or can you point any project or any money spending on a housing itself, quote unquote, constructing a housing or building something, rather than on these improvement for the street improvement and the sidewalk improvements?
Yeah, certainly. So you're correct. The funding, the Community Development Block Grant Program, is a HUD funded project. It is not exclusively for housing, as the title entails. It's community investment, community development. We have used CDBG funding for the Mercy Housing Permanent Supportive Housing Project. We actually allocated just over $1 million in CDBG funds for the PSH project, in addition to other city funds. In the past, we have also allocated CDBG funds to support the West Gateway Place project. That's at the corner of Tower Bridge Gateway and Grand, or West Capitol Avenue. CDBG funds have also been used for residential rehabilitation programs that we've done in the past. So we've done a combination of both housing-related activities, capital improvement activities. What we haven't really done are service-related activities, but most of the CDBG funds in the past have been used primarily for housing, but also for capital improvement activities like the E&F Street project and the North River Walk Trail project. We have also used CDBG funds for a first-time homebuyer program in the past.
Thanks, Rahul. Appreciate it.
I also had a few questions.
Yes.
Ultimate Commissioner Thomas, I was wondering, once the Washington neighborhood sidewalk lighting and landscaping project, will that be prioritized once the environmental reviews have been successfully completed?
So prioritized in what way?
Well, now that we're considering pushing it back due to the environmental studies not being completed in a timely fashion, will this still hold a priority with us to ensure that it is being done in a as timely manner as possible versus being kicked down the road?
Yes. Thank you. So sorry for thank you for the clarification. So the city allocated CDBG funds in 2019, 2020, and 2021. So we still have the 2019 and the 2020 allocations for the E&F Street Improvement Project. The only funds that we are currently asking to be reallocated are the 2021 allocation. And that's again so that we can meet that timely expenditure test. And yes, we anticipate that we will likely recommend that a portion or most of the 2022 CDBG allocation go towards the E&F Street project to basically supplant these funds that were reallocated to the North River Walk Trail project.
Very good. Thank you. My next question is, are there any liability or compliance concerns with ADA sidewalking in the Washington neighborhood? Or is this proposed infrastructure improvement to the area being done just to increase accessibility to all?
I think it's both. If you look at the aerial of the project area along E and F, there are no sidewalks, at least on the north side of E and the south side of F. And I may have those, switched around. But if you look at an aerial map, and maybe I can pull one right now, you can see that there are no sidewalks. So definitely there's no ADA accessibility. The sidewalks that are along E and F on the northern and southern side are not also ADA. So they do have some ADA improvements, but they are not fully compliant, is my understanding.
Thank you for that. And also thank you for your meaningful work, you and Mark.
Thank you.
Unless there are other comments, we need a motion to recommend the Economic Development and Housing Commission that we approve Amendment 1, that we recommend that City Council approve Amendment 1. I'm going to get the words right here.
So this is Commissioner Guerra. I make a motion that the Economic Development and Housing Commission recommends that the City Council approve Amendment 1 to the CDBG 2001 Annual Action Plan.
Commissioner Olson, I second that.
That was a mouthful.
It is.
Hey, I've been working with CDBG for over 20 years now, and I still, get tongue twisted once in a while. So.
All right, and Madam Clerk, will you do our roll call?
Sure. Commissioner Guerra?
Yes.
Commissioner Kim?
Yes.
Commissioner Olson? Oh, I think Commissioner Olson froze. I'll get back to you. Commissioner Singh?
Yes.
Commissioner Thornton?
Yes.
Chairperson White?
Yes.
Alternate Commission Member Thomas?
Yes.
And I'll go back to Commissioner Olson.
Yes.
Thank you.
All right, and we are on to our wrap up. And the first thing is requests or comments from the commissioners. And I would like to make one quick comment first. You heard Mark talk about the WestSac Connect app, which I pulled up on my phone. And if you do not have this on your phone yet, it's called West Sacramento Connect from the iTunes store. I don't have the other one, so I don't know if it's in the Android store. But one of the really great things about it is if you see, as Mark said, a homeless encampment or a broken sprinkler or a street light that's out or weeds that are overgrown and present a fire danger, you can start a new request right from your phone. And when you take a picture of it and tell it what it is, it geolocates it and sends it directly into the city's database. And so they can respond to things very quickly. And I found that to be especially effective this summer when I saw broken sprinklers, commercial sprinklers. So make sure you put that on your phone and tell your friends to use it. The other little thing I want to mention is Friday night is our tree lighting ceremony that we have not done for 2 years. So right out in front of City Hall, 6 o'clock, bring your kids. Santa will be there. So other comments from commissioners besides me?
This is Commissioner Kim. I was just, it's a question that doesn't need to be answered today, but just a question for the city staff about, is there any updates on how American Rescue Plan funding is being deployed or allocated, especially in the context of creating jobs and other economic development implications? And we don't need to go into it tonight, but just something that I would love to follow up offline.
Thank you, Commissioner. I'll make a note of that. I'm not. I know that there's a process that's being followed, and I believe that that's going to be discussed in the upcoming executive team retreat that's happening, I believe, this month of December. But I will get some information, and we can try to report back on what process the city is going to be following to allocate those ARP funds.
And then as a follow-up, after the ARP funds, maybe sometime in the future, also if there's a city plan on how we are going after the national infrastructure bill, the Build Back Better plan, and because I know there's a lot of funding, and I know there's a lot of new exemptions in this plan. There's NEPA exemptions. I was very privileged to get a briefing from Congressman Garamendi, who was walking through some of these new funding mechanisms that are expediting the development process. So it's very fascinating.
Definitely, we'll get some information for you on that.
And another little side note for everybody, both Andrew and I have been appointed to the Yolo County Climate Commission, and the commission has its second meeting tomorrow night. So if you didn't have enough commission meetings, join us again on Zoom tomorrow night. So with that, let's move over to staff update.
Thank you again. Katie unfortunately had a last minute conflict, so she's not able to join us tonight, but she did have a couple of updates that she wanted me to share with the commission. One of them you already mentioned, Chairperson White, is the tree lighting that is happening this December 6th from 6 to 9 p.m. So obviously everybody's welcome, and we hope to see everybody there. As Commissioner White mentioned, Santa will be there.
Except it's December 3rd, not the 6th. It's this Friday.
December 3rd. Okay. Well, thank you for that clarification. Katie must have had the wrong date because she gave me December 6th. Thank you for that. Another update that she had is that the ribbon cutting for the West Capitol Improvement Project that was originally scheduled for December 8th has been unfortunately rescheduled. So we will send out notifications to the new date for that ribbon cutting. And as we mentioned in Isaiah's presentation, the North Riverwalk Trail project is expected to break ground in February of 2022. So she did want the commission to know that. And lastly, the third 5-year investment plan for the Bridge District will be going to council next Wednesday, December 8th. We will get the commission a copy of the investment plan, which is focused on the Riverwalk and the riverfront investments. So please keep an eye out for that. It should be coming to you in the next couple of days. And that's all the staff updates that we have.
Great, thank you. So with that, we need a motion to adjourn.
Commissioner Kim, motion to adjourn, please.
I
Commissioner,
second it. Oh,
sorry,
right.
we're all anxious. Commissioner Thornton, second to adjourn.
And our final roll call of the evening.
Thank you. Commissioner Guerra,
Yes.
Commissioner Kim,
Yes.
Commissioner Olson,
Yes.
Commissioner Singh,
Yes.
Commissioner Thornton,
Yes.
Chairperson White,
Yes.
and alternate commission member Thomas.
Yes.
Thank you.
Just a quick question. If one of us said no, would that mean that all of us had to stay on the Zoom?
That was a good question.
I'll do it.
All right, thanks so much. And if I do not see you at the tree lighting on Friday, have a great, or on tomorrow night's commission meeting, have a great holiday, and I look forward to seeing everybody again in 2022.
Bye, everyone.
Thank you, everybody.
Bye.
Thank you, everyone.
Bye.
Bye.